UFOs, are they aliens, government secret projects, the imaginings of disturbed individuals, or just outright hoaxes? We're here to find out. Welcome to Jim Harold's UFO Encounters.
Welcome to UFO Encounters, and I think we're going to have a spectacular show tonight. Now, far too often, I think those of us based in the U.S. look at UFOs as strictly as an American phenomena. But the truth is that this happens all over the world, and I think we lose sight of some very interesting and important cases. They're all over the world. And today we're going to talk with someone who is very authoritative in this area, and particularly he has done a recent book on Brazilian UFOs. Appropriately enough, it's called UFO Contacts in Brazil, and I'm talking about THIAGO CICCHETTI, and he has a great background to do this. His father was a pilot in the Brazilian Air Force, and he's been researching UFOs for more than 22 years. He is the co-editor and columnist for UFO Magazine and a columnist for UFO Truth Magazine. He has published dozens of articles and foreign publications. He's the author of 9 books, and he is the current president of the Brazilian Commission of Ufologists. He holds a degree in business administration from the Unified Teaching Association of the Federal District, AEUDF, and he has an executive MBA from the Brazilian Institute of Capital Markets. THIAGO, thank you for joining us today on UFO Encounters.
Thank you very much, Jim. Thank you all.
In terms of your bio, I'm interested about your father. Now, was the fact that you were attracted to the UFO question, was it just because of the association with flight, or did your father ever share any experiences with you? What led you to this area of expertise and interest?
My father always liked the UFO phenomenon. He was a Brazilian Air Force pilot, but he never saw during his work flying. Never saw a UFO, but he saw with my uncle a UFO for 3 nights in a row when he was a teenager in São Paulo back in the 50s, the 60s. He saw a flying saucer, like a flying saucer classic type of UFO. He saw for 3 nights in a row. I don't know if this raised his interest about the UFO phenomena, but since I was a child, I saw him reading magazines about UFOs and books like Chariots of Gods from Erich von Däniken. And it's an amazing book, my first book that I read about UFO.
By the way, I just want to mention, just interviewed him last week. What a thrill that was.
He's amazing. I know him. I was with him last year when he came to UFO Summit in Brazil. So I was co-hoster in Brasilia, and he was here together with Giorgio Tsoukalos. They are amazing. And my father, my father born like me, with UFO in our blood. So I think that's where this interest come from.
Now, I think particularly most of our listeners are American, but we have considerable listeners in places like the UK and Australia and so forth. But I think most Americans, they think about Roswell and they think about Rendlesham Forest, and maybe they go as a far afield of thinking of Rendlesham Forest in the UK, but or Kecksburg in the States, but they don't really, I don't think most people look at it internationally. And I think that's unfortunate, but I'm looking at the table of contents here, and you go back to pre-1930s, and this book is almost 600 pages. So that tells me, with the page count and looking at all these experiences, that Brazil has had a lot of activity over the decades, haven't they?
Yeah, Brazil is a hot spot. It's a UFO hotspot. Everybody knows about the Roswell, the Rendlesham Forest, the Kecksburg UFO crash.
That was the other one I was thinking about.
Yeah, and the people knows a little about Varginha case and Antônio Vilas Boas case. But these cases, they are not the only one. Brazil has a lot of cases that are unknown in other countries. That's why I thought to write this book, to show what Brazil have and what we can show to the world, about ufology.
Now, if you don't mind, I'd like to go through the different decades and maybe spotlight a case or two from each decade, if that's okay with you. Now, the first one that caught my attention, pre-1930s, the first UFO report published in Brazil by Augusto Case. Now, how far does that go back?
Very, very far. This case I found looking for the National Archives here in Brazil. This was back pre-1930s. So this was published in a newspaper in an article published in Brazil in 1959. The first time this was published. And this case happened in 1871.
Wow.
Very, very far, very, very in the past. So, was a classic sighting of a light in the sky. They didn't know what was a UFO or a flying saucer. They saw something in the sky and said it was a fire shield or a ghost ship, something like that. And this shows that Brazil has many, many stories come from the past.
And you have a case from the 30s and 40s. The frequency starts to pick up. Now, I have to ask you about Mario Restier. 4 months of your life are gone. That sounds very ominous. What was that case about?
Yeah, this case is amazing because he was abducted and he spent four months out of this planet. To him, was like 2-3 hours, 4 hours in space-time. But to us, spent more than 4 months here on Earth. And then when he came back, he was divorced. His wife just left him. Everybody thought he was dead and missing. No one knows where he was. And his story was not believed by many, but his wife believed him. And this case was yet studied by the investigate the right word by the Brazilian police, that they concluded that something happened and he was not lying.
Now, it's interesting, as I'm looking here, it looks like the cases pick up starting in the 50s. Do you think that was just because the older cases may not have been documented or harder to find, or do you believe, as we see here in the U.S., for example, you see that post-war tick-up after World War II. It seems like whatever is visiting us is increasing its frequency, increasing its interactions. Why do you think that the case count starts to pick up in the 1950s?
Well, I think that before Roswell, the modern ufology began with 1947 with Kenneth Arnold's sighting, right? But before that, people saw something in the sky. Absolutely, of course, they saw, but they didn't know what it was. Some thought that might be a meteor or a comet or something natural. And after ufology became more popular, people start to look more to the sky. And today, this is opposite. Today, the people are not looking to the sky. They are looking to iPads, iPhones, to the. I said people walking, looking to the ground. Never don't look up at the sky. So cases we always had cases in Brazil, but from the 40s and the 50s, when the ufology became a little more popular, people start to think, well, what I saw is not natural, so should be a UFO.
That's a very good point indeed. And I want to get to some more of the cases, but I mean, you've been researching this for well over 2 decades now. Do you have any theories what UFOs represent? I know you have the theories, the kind of spacecraft theories, kind of the Stanton Friedman school of thought, the late great Stanton Friedman. And then as time goes on, I think you have more and more people who are looking at other alternatives. Are these interdimensional travelers? Are they possibly some kind of spiritual beings rather than, are the UFOs in essence alive? Are they not craft? Over the years, I'm guessing that you've had to develop some personal thoughts on what this represents. What are your thoughts?
Well, there's a lot of theories, a lot of things that demons and devil, like you said, But I think they are from other planets. And I truly believe that, because it's not the easy way to say, but I think that it's much more easy. Let's say that it's more easy to come from another planet than come from the future, that come from parallel universes. So I believe in my research. It's my own opinion, of course. They are from another planets. And the most amazing that I wrote 10 books. One of them is about UFO alien typology, and I found 72 types in my research that are in my book of different alien beings. So let's say if only 1% of the 72, we're going to have 7 types of aliens visiting our planet. So there are 7 types of aliens from different planets to visiting our planet. So to me, the best theory is that they come from another planet. Now, I don't know how. Maybe they have the technology, space and travels, speed of light, something like that. But to me, they come from another planets.
I've never understood the argument that some of the debunkers make, some of the hardcore skeptics. And I think some skepticism is in order, but I think sometimes people go too far with it and say, oh, there can't be anything to any of this. Then I'm like, well, I think there can be, and I think you're being disingenuous. But one of the theories that I used to hear a lot, you don't hear it as much anymore, I noticed, is, well, they can't possibly be here because the distances are too far. Now, let's face it. If there is something visiting us, I think by definition, they have to be extremely more technologically savvy than we are. So how do we know what their science is capable of? I mean, if you think about it, the Wright brothers first flew heavier than aircraft in 1903. By 1969, man was on the moon. And that's only a span of less than 70 years. Now, if their science is 200, 500, 1,000, 10,000 years ahead of ours, who are we to say that the distances are too vast, because we're looking at it from our knowledge and from our set of assumptions? Maybe they have, super science that, what did Arthur C. Clarke said, advanced enough science, something along the lines of, if science is advanced enough, it's indistinguishable from magic. So the point being, just because it doesn't make sense to us doesn't mean they haven't cracked that code and figure out how to travel these vast, vast distances relatively quickly.
Yeah, the universe has 13.7 billion of years. Our planet has 4 billions of years. So how can be sure that between 13 billions of years and 5 billions of years, another planet or another planets had intelligent life? We are a kid. We're just our planet, just a kid in relating with the universe time of years. So why not another planet had a kind of a species, a kind of a being that development very, very much than ours? They probably should be much more older than our civilization. So that's not impossible. And they now have a technology that we'll have in, 1,000 of years, 100 of years. I don't know. Our science is very, very fast.
Right. They could just be a couple of 100 years ahead of us and have figured this out, because again, I mean, I am 50 years old and I grew up here in the States, probably lower middle class, working class, whatever you want to call it. And, but I mean, we had the modern conveniences for the most part, but our telephone for my growing up years was one singular telephone, and we were a little behind the times. We had a rotary dial on it. And I have a phone in my hand now that has, incredible computing power, that can do things that the Pentagon couldn't do in the 50s or 60s with their computing power. So it's just amazing how quickly we've gone into span of 30, 40 years, which also brings up the question, and here's my little pet theory, is that you see an explosion of technology after the Second World War. That also coincides with the increase of UFO sightings, or at least reports. I always wonder if technology has been captured, and at least some of the seed technology for some of the innovations we enjoy today are based on reverse engineered alien technology from a possible crash, or maybe even technology sharing, who knows? But it just seems like things were kind of chugging along, and you hit about 1947, 1948, and everything explodes. The integrated chip, microchips, all of the innovations, just everything seemed to burst at the same time. Now, a lot of people would point to the space program, point to the war effort, and those kind of things, and certainly those had a role. But I wonder if there isn't some X factor in there.
Yes, of course. You got a very good point. After the 40s, after the World War, after the Roosevelt crash, we had a boom of technology. A very, very huge advance of technology. We had the microwaves, we had the Kevlar, we have microchips, we had fiber optics. So something that got we had in our hands in a short period of time, and we still grow in this technology. Today we have a watch that will be replaced, the phones, the cell phones soon. My wife was in Nevada last week working, and she brought me a Apple Watch. This Apple Watch do the same things except take photos that my iPhone does. The same. And it's so small. You can talk, you can listen music, you can type message and WhatsApp, except take photos. So the technology is going so fast that in a blink of eyes, we'll be another planet soon.
Yeah, very well could be. Now, I want to go back to some of the other cases, if you don't mind, a few here that caught my eye. From the 50s, priest photographs UFO over the city of Brasilia. And obviously, that's a huge, major metropolis. What was that case about?
Yes, the Father Raimundo here in Brasilia, he took this picture. He was a priest in a religious school here in Brasilia, and he was the class just ended, finished the class, and he was walking to the school, and many of the students were looking at the sky and pointing. There's something in the sky. Look, there's something in the sky. And Father Raimundo saw it and borrowed a camera, an old camera, film camera, and took 3 photos of the UFO. And the UFO looks like a hat, a Panama hat. And, it was in 1969. There was no drones on the sky. A hat cannot fly like a plane or a helicopter. And Brasilia had only 9 years old. The city of Brasilia, Núcleo Bandeirante, is a near city of Brasilia, Distrito Federal. The state of Brasilia is Distrito Federal. And Núcleo Bandeirante was a small town near Brasilia. And Brasilia had just 9 years of foundation. And there's nothing here. There's a few people living in Brasilia back at that time. And this was not a plane. This was not a helicopter or a drone or a balloon, nothing. And the priest got these amazing pictures of the flying saucers in Brasilia, over Brasilia.
And that always interests me, particularly older photography of UFOs and so forth, because now, kind of to our point about the technology, you can almost fake anything. You could have the old joke, the UFOs land on the White House lawn. But to have those older pieces of photographic evidence and so forth, that's important. Now, do those photos still exist? I mean, is it something I can look up on the internet and see? Or buy your book?
Or buy my book. My book, there's more than 300 photos and illustrations. It's very hard today to investigate a possible UFO photo or film. Some you can just look and you can say that's a fake, but many people are working very hard to try to fake the photos. And internet is not the best place to get good information. It's not. Internet, there's no boundaries. There's no barriers. Anyone can put everything they want. So we have to be very careful when we see something on internet without a proper and deeply research of a ufologist.
And I agree. I mean, it's great that we have so much information, but by the fact there's no barrier to, it's like what my line of business. I'm a podcaster and I do this full time professionally. I like to think that it's on par with a broadcast or a radio show that you would listen to done by a radio station or a radio network. But there's a million podcasts and I don't believe for a minute they're all high quality. So you see that in every layer of the internet. It's fantastic. It's just finding the good information and separating the wheat from the chaff. It's not always easy to do. I got to ask you about this one. 1960s, the flying VW Beetle case. There was a flying Volkswagen in Brazil?
Yes. Here in Brazil, we call the Beetle, Fusca. This case was amazing and was not the only one episode in the world, because in Argentina in 78 happened the same. But in Brazil, this case happened in 1967. Romeu Tavares was a father of the family. He was traveling with his wife and his daughter. They were in a trip, so they were in a road and they saw a UFO coming towards him, and then the UFO stood hovering his Beetle, and for some reason they felt that everything surround them was freeze, like if the time was stopped, and they felt that the vehicle start to elevate, and then they look up and saw the UFO was a huge bright sphere that had shot a light of beam over them inside the car, and the car was lifting over the ground. For some seconds, they was just flying, and then they was put back on the road and keep their trip. When they reached their home, they found something like dust, a white dust, all over the car. They had no explanation for that. They got no rain during the trip. They got no dust dust in the road. But this white dust, they supposed to come from the UFO. It was an amazing case, and the book is a very detailed, very case.
Now, when researching this, especially with the older cases, were you able to go back? In some cases, I'm sure some of the people have passed, obviously, some of these very old cases. Were you ever able to go back and talk to some of the experiencers, or did you kind of put this together from media accounts? How did you put this together?
Well, I took 3 years to write this book, and I did books reference, of course, but I also talked with ufologists that studied many of these cases, and I could talk with witnesses of 2 of these cases, because many of the cases didn't happen in Brasilia, but I got in touch by email and telephone, and 2 witnesses I talked personally, and this case was the Paranoá Dome and the Papuda prison UFO. These 2 witnesses, I spoke with them, and they told me everything again without miss a word from the time that they talk in the report.
Yeah, I mean, to do this much work and these many cases, I mean, it's a pretty awesome undertaking. This is not, sometimes when you go and I've had this before, we talk to somebody and they have a book out and you look up the book and it's like a pamphlet. It's 46 pages or something. And it's like, no, this is 580 pages. This is a book. This is a book. And certainly, as you said, not your first. I think in the bio that I'd read, it said 9. You mentioned 10, including this one. So I want to make sure we get that straight. You've done 10 books. Now, Another one that interests me here is the UFO wave of 1978. And I'm always interested in these waves of sightings. And this one I've heard of. Talk to us about that and why that was such an important wave of sightings.
This wave happened in 77, 78 in Brazil. And the best example of that was the Operation Plate, Operação Prato in Portuguese, when many UFOs simply attacked people in the cities of north of Brazil. One of the cities, Colares, were the hotspot back the time of the sightings. The UFOs appeared during the night, during the day, and shot rays of light and hit people in his shoulders or in females over their breasts, and took blood of these people. When these people went to the doctor said, well, you got anemia, and one person died because of that. The mayor of many cities asked for help for the Brazilian Air Force that sent a crew to investigate it. This crew of militaries was led by Captain Holanda, with G. Holanda, and they researched from October to 77 to December 77. And they got in touch with UFOs, and Captain Holanda got contact with alien being in a distance of 5 meters. He was face to face of an alien being that came from a UFO. They took more than 100 photos. They made more than 25 hours of films of UFOs. Hundreds of reports of witnesses, sketches, drawings, a lot of things. Many of these photos are in my book, but we're still looking for, and we're still pushing and pressing the Brazilian government and the Brazilian Air Force to release the rest of the photos, and mainly, and more important, to release the film that was made by made of the UFOs.
And there's been pushback on that?
Well, they said to us that, we don't have it, we lost it, we don't know what is it. It's a lie. It's a lie. I know it's a lie. And I tell you that because before my father died in 1993, my father was chief of A2 department in Brazilian Air Force in Rio de Janeiro. A2 is the secret service of Brazilian Air Force. And my father was divorced of my mother, and every Friday, my brother and I, we go to my father's work to meet him, and then we go to his house to spend the weekend with him. And every time I asked, Dad, what you have about UFO here in our department? You know, you are a secret service. You must have something. And he always said to me, no, I don't have nothing. I don't have nothing. Well, one day I asked it again. And he said to me, to a soldier, get those 2 boxes that we have about UFOs there. And he brought 2 boxes, like Archivos, like that brown box of paper, made of paper. And inside that box had a lot of reports of pilots, only reports of pilots. And one of these reports had a photo of took from the cockpit of our plane of a UFO, a classic flying saucer with no window, like silver, like a metal, made of metal, silver, shine silver, just 100 meters from the UFO the airplane cockpit. And I saw this photo. Wow, this was the proof, the evidence that I need to believe. And it was the report that the pilot made that, we were flying and saw this flying saucer in our left. And this photo was so perfect. And this photo was never released. Never released. That's why I believe the Brazilian government and the Brazilian Air Force still have documents, photos, and films.
Now that leads to another question I have. Do you feel that we're getting closer to disclosure? Now it sounds like in this case, that UFO flap from the 70s, that the government's claiming what papers, what documents, what photos. And that would make one think, well, there isn't going to be disclosure because there's still this pushback. Do you think that there is some hope for disclosure? What are your thoughts?
I think we'll never get a full disclosure. Never. It's impossible. Why it's impossible? Because must have so many documents, films, photos that I think the internet will break down. There's no paper to print it. There's no. It's and the most important, the consequences if the government make a full opening is that, well, now you're saying that those people that you call it crazy, those people that lost their jobs because of you, those people that lost their families because of you, were telling the truth. And you said they were lying, that they were crazy. Well, the consequence would be huge. These people go sue the state, sue the militaries, though. So I think that's gonna have a release like that. Well, we found a planet that can have life. There's water, and then, well, maybe we this UFO are from another planet. I think they're gonna start from a point, and that point forward. They never release backward.
That's interesting. Yes, I think that makes a lot of sense. Kind of like a slow acknowledging, never any admittance that they've been covering up things for decades.
Yeah. To them, if they say so, they're going to be in bad sheets.
And we never even got to the 1980s, 1990s, or the 2000s. But I do want to ask you, in this book, do you have a favorite case?
I do have the case that happened in 1996 over Brasilia, the Paranoia Dawn, when 3 businessmen saw a UFO. The UFO chased them, and the UFO hovered the road in front of them, and they had to pass under the UFO. And then they stopped in a dawn, Paranoia Dawn. One of these businessmen called his son. There was a professional photographer, and they took 36 photos of the UFO. One of these photos is in my book. But to get better, 2 police officers saw the UFO as well with these three businessmen, and one of these police officers had a hand camera, and he filmed the UFO for 4 minutes, and they showed the film to all his battalion, all his fellows, and asked ufologists to research, to investigate and analyze the film. And we got a conclusion that was not an airplane, and was not a balloon or a planet or a helicopter. In 1996, there was no drone as well. So that was a genuine UFO case, in my opinion, and I like it very much.
Well, I've liked our interview very much. It's been a lot of fun to talk to you, THIAGO, and certainly you know of where you speak. If people want to tune into your work and also this book and your other books, where could they find all of that information?
Well, this book in English is selling at Amazon.com, the site of Amazon.com. The other books are in Portuguese, but if you can read in Portuguese or if you know Spanish, you can understand. You can buy at Revista UFO magazine as ufo.com.br, and you can buy it. And I have YouTube channel, just ask for THIAGO TICCHETTI, and Facebook as well, same word, and you can find my work and find what I'm doing.
Well, it's certainly been a pleasure. THIAGO TICCHETTI, thank you for joining us today on UFO Encounters.
Thank you, Jim.
And thank you for tuning into UFO Encounters. We certainly appreciate it. And I'm sure THIAGO agrees. Keep your eye to the sky. We'll talk to you next time. Have a great week, everybody. Bye-bye.